Monday Night Football. No matter what happened over the weekend, no matter how great it was, no matter how bad it was, you could put all of that in the rear view. It doesn't matter anymore. Week 3 finally comes to an end, either to look back and just continue to recap the positive, or thank God, I can't wait for this thing to be over. Either way, you have one more opportunity to make some money. And you're damn right, we're going to give you 5 and 5 here as we do on this video. We'll run the clock coming up. I'll even give you a sneak peek as far as what we have first off as I blabber away for the next 10, 15 seconds. But look, we want you to hit the thumbs up button first and foremost. That's the big thing here. Be a part of the Odd Shopper community as well. Hit the subscribe button, the fastest growing sports betting community on YouTube. We love saying that. Absolutely love saying that. All right, I don't want to waste your time anymore. I'm going to tell you about DraftKings BetMGM. I'm going to tell you about the insider access. I'm going to tell you about all of that coming up. But let's do it. 5 bets in 5 minutes. Start the clock, will you? Tony Pollard over 37.5 rushing yards is where we begin. Why? Because the Giants' rush defense, they're 2-0, but they're not good. They were gashed on the ground by Christian McCaffrey, over 100 yards, 6.8 yards per carry. Are you kidding me? And here's the thing. While Dallas will look to get Zeke going on the ground, Pollard has been better. Pollard, including yards from scrimmage on the field, taking advantage of opportunities. Oh, by the way, it's still Cooper Rush. There is still a need to run the football as much as humanly possible. Pollard, this is what I absolutely love about Tony Pollard. One of the few backs in the NFL that can truly maximize limited touches. He did it last week with 9 on the ground, went over this number. Expect him to go over again. The combination of carries, taking advantage of those limited carries, and going up against this Giants defense, which brings us to our second pick. Over Ezekiel Elliott rushing yards, 59.5. 15 carries against the Bengals. We are targeting volume, okay? Volume, the ability to just know here, no matter what happens in this game outside of a massive blowout by the Giants, which is not going to happen, Zeke's going to get his touches. Ezekiel Elliott needs a breakout game this year. He needs that, and everybody in this team, in this organization, recognizes that Mike McCarthy is going to make a concerted effort to get Ezekiel Elliott the football. We saw that last week. Even if it takes a little bit or a lot of bit to warm up, so long as Dallas is not blown off the map, expect a concerted effort to get Zeke carries. I'd be shocked if he doesn't hit 15 carries. That's where we go with our second prop, Ezekiel Elliott over 59.5 rushing yards. Did I mention that it's Daniel Jones? Did I mention that Daniel Jones is 1-8 against the spread? Or the Giants are, and Jones is a big part of this. 1-8 against the spread, coming off consecutive wins. Daniel Jones, the Giants, they don't know how to handle this. And the Dallas defense is going to victimize the Giants offense, especially their quarterback. And just think about it. You've got still Daniel Jones dealing with new faces out there. Still, I don't even know if you could count Kenny Golladay and Daniel Jones as a 1-2 connection simply because of all the time that Golladay has missed. We love targeting a pick six, a fumble return, hell, even a kick return on prime time. It's going to happen. And at plus 750, there's a really good opportunity here to take advantage of this Dallas defense, who will be causing turnovers and will be in Daniel Jones' face. And that's what we love. All right, next play is a field goal. Total field goals made. Remember, one of the 2 that we hit over the weekend, Ryan Suckup over 1.5 at plus money. This is just 4 field goals at minus 110. Graham Gano wasn't used in week 1, kicked 4 last week from all over the place against the Panthers. The Giants will face a tough one, as we mentioned, against Dallas this week. Expect the Dallas defense to stall some drives. Going to Gano for some distance kicks is exactly what the Giants are going to have to do. Remember, Or in case you don't remember, or in case you didn't even watch, Gano kicked 2 from 50 plus and was perfect from there. We also have Brett Maher on the other side. Kept under wraps in week 1, only to kick 2 50 plus last week. Both of these guys will be asked to kick. Both of these guys are dealing with quarterback.
And we are live. Welcome to the NFL Strategy Show Recap Edition, taking a look at everything we saw yesterday for Week 3 in the NFL. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Lots to talk about, lots to break down. Before we do it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how did your NFL slate shake out yesterday?
Really frustrating. Didn't go great. Lost a normal amount. But if you told me that, the highest owned player on the slate that I barely have gets hurt with 1 point, and you tell me that the 2 games I stacked the most each go for 60 at low ownership, I would have assumed that I'm not here talking about losing.
Yeah, that's the NFL for you. It's just best laid plans. You think it's going to be good, and then all of a sudden it's just like, I didn't have any of that stuff that was bad, and I'm still bad.
Right.
It's rarely fun. Cash, anything good there?
I didn't play cash.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. Look, we got a lot to break down. It was an interesting slate. I love digging into this show. This was a show that you and I used to do. I am no longer on it. I'm filling in for Eric today. It worked out perfectly for me. Otherwise, I was going to be doing the 4-game baseball slate twice today. So instead of doing that, I get to cover this, and I don't have to be on MLB Live Before Lock. So worked out for me as far as I'm concerned.
Wait, you're not on Live Before Lock?
I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. Because Chris was messaging you about it.
You've got Eric.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was on Live Before Lock, and now we are on the opposites. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we saw for yesterday. And I think the easiest place to start is going to be as with the most owned guy in the Millie yesterday. That would be one David Montgomery, who finished with a crisp 1.1 fantasy points at 32.5% ownership. Got hurt basically immediately. It's not like anything was going to go well for Montgomery anyway. It's not like they had a running back step directly into that role and be the third highest. Oh, wait, no, he was chalky, and his backup just absolutely smashed. You mentioned that you were light on David Montgomery. Was there anything you saw in particular that you expected to be light on Montgomery, or did you have any concept that was coming when you were doing your build?
No, in general, I was light on pretty much all of the most popular players yesterday. For Montgomery, and I think part of the reason, one, I just kind of have been playing a little bit more contrarian recently in all sports. But also, yesterday was just a slate where the pricing was really tight. And I think it led to some chalk that they were the best plays, but they weren't great plays. It was kind of just they were better than the alternatives. Sure. And on slates like that, I'm always going to typically I'm just going to be more contrarian. It's one thing if, let's say Jonathan Taylor was 5,900 for some reason. I'm not going to just blindly not play him. But, I think Montgomery was kind of not correctly priced. He was a little bit underpriced, but not wildly underpriced. It was more so he's just better than a lot of the correctly priced guys.
He was someone I ended up being basically neutral to. I had 25% of him across everything that I did yesterday. So, in and around that 30% mark, nothing too crazy. You had 6% of him in the Millie, which at 115 or whenever the hell that information comes through, right away, you must be very happy.
Yeah, I was really happy when that happened. And then when I saw that he was doubtful to return, I was like, cool, that gives me a really good chance at doing well on this slate.
Well, as it turns out, most of the chalk from yesterday just sucked, or at least was in some different version of sucked. Second highest owned guy in the Millie yesterday was Stephon Diggs, finished with 14.5 fantasy points. That is a letdown. Miles Sanders, the third most owned guy in the Millie, finished with 5.4 fantasy points. Unequivocally a letdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 13, letdown. Irv Smith, 5, letdown. Jalen Waddle, 18, solid enough day. You're not brokenhearted about having it. Curtis Samuel, not that great. Fournette, bust. Jags D, bust-ish. Tyreek Hill, giant bust. You just needed to not be anywhere at the top. If you just pull up your exposure, if you just pull up your exposures, add them to lineup study, your every single name that I just named is in bright red for your column, and that is still doesn't matter at all. You still need to get everything else correct as well. Do you take anything away from seeing like just giant chalk busts across the board? Like, can you even walk away from this thinking like, oh, this is what I would like to change?
Not really. I mean, I think it's a reminder that there's a lot of variance in football. You know, we always talk about baseball as being that sport where, there's just a ton of variance, but it's football too. You know, it's so touchdown dependent. So I think that's kind of just a reminder that, you know, it's not basketball. Like, these guys are still really, really volatile. But as far as my exposures go, I'm kind of unsure. Like, I don't know if I like the way that looks. I was
going to get to that.
Yeah. Like, on the one hand, I like that, you know, I'm just getting away from all these really popular guys. On the other hand, it seems like I might be a little bit too light.
Just looking at it, I feel like it's probably too light. That there's enough spots to get low-owned guys elsewhere that you're too far away from some of these guys that were solid plays. Like, maybe more so with Montgomery, although I guess like the higher that number goes, the more extreme that stance ends up being.
Wait, what'd you say?
When I look at Montgomery's ownership, like, I'm not surprised that you're light. The higher that number goes, like, the easier it's going to be to get away from him and get to something else. But what else were you getting to in that range?
So, like, the mid-range running backs?
Yeah.
Or I had 18% James Conner at 1% owned.
Okay.
At 6,200. But I also I had
a similar stance on Connor, so yeah. Same play there.
I had 15% Chase Edmonds at 1%, which not that it was intentional, but I did actually really like that, given that I was fading the Buffalo-Miami game pretty aggressively. I liked having that stance on Chase Edmonds. I'd actually talked about that on the show yesterday morning. But yeah, I also kind of just got out of that range. Like, I played like 18% Derrick Henry, who was just more expensive. I played 20% Joe Mixon, who was more expensive. I was even with the field on Dalvin Cook. I played Kamara at 7K. So I kind of just didn't play a lot of guys in that price range.
Okay, so there were 229 150 maxers in the Millie yesterday. I took all of those 150 maxers, looked at the average sum ownership for every single one of those 150 maxers. Again, the number is 229. Where do you think you rank in average sum ownership?
229.
228.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily have to be like a good thing or a bad thing. Like, you can be anywhere sort of on this list and make a reasonable path. There are multiple names that I recognize around there that are comparable and are also pros. Do you like that you are the second most, in theory, let's just say second most contrarian person in the Millie yesterday?
I think so.
Okay.
Because like, I've kind of been like thinking through it. The argument typically, I think, for being less contrarian is that, contrary to what a lot of people say, you do need min caches to maintain money and keep playing DFS. But I'm really not sure it makes that much of a difference with how top heavy things are. Like, I'm losing, on a typical slate, you're losing, 30% one way or the other, I think. And so I'm not really sure that being that contrarian, especially in a tournament like the Millie, is actually problematic. And then also, I don't really think that I was like really heavy on bad plays. It would be one thing if, I just had a 30% stand on whatever the NFL equivalent of Jaren Jackson is. But, it's outside of like, I had a really aggressive stand on like Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker and Nelson Aguilar, but like that was just all me stacking that game. It's not like I just had random shitty plays showing up 15% of the time.
Are you happy with your player pool size? 160, fifth biggest player pool as well.
That seems like it's kind of a lot, but
that would be my thought process when I look at it and just think like, if I'm going to be wildly contrarian, I don't know if I want to be that by having 2 bites of everybody.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of looking towards the bottom of my exposures. It's just a lot of like, just random guy here and there. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably something that ideally, it's a little bit more concentrated.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm sure you don't have the, like, not that we're trying to pick this apart, but like I would want to trim basically everybody that was in 1 or 2 of those lineups, which looks to be like maybe 40 guys. Remove those guys from any particular crunch along with anybody else that didn't show up, and then try to get my best lineups with only the guys that are actually showing up after I've sorted. But I don't think you have the sort of time to be able to do that prior to lock.
Well, and the one other thing that I am kind of noticing, not for all of them, there's certainly some guys that had ownership and I played like once. A lot of the guys that I have like 1% of are also like 1% owned. So
fair.
I think it's kind of reasonable that they're just in a lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading this more as like 80% just shit luck for a day, dodging all of the unowned chalk. Well, so that's sort of the question then. What happens if chalk just plays better this week? Do you just get absolutely annihilated?
Right. That's kind of that's what I was thinking on the one hand, but on the other hand, it goes back to like, I think chalk was just really, really, really concentrated on similar plays. Like, fair. I don't think I was playing super low probability guys. I'd be a lot more concerned about my exposures if I thought that, Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara and James Conner were like only going to succeed 2% of the time or something. I don't think that's the case, clearly. So I kind of just think I was playing similar enough projected lineups at no ownership.
I mean, I think it's interesting to look at it like this. Just looking at like, I don't know, your top 10 guys or whatever, your 2 most exposed guys scored 16.5 and 16.5. That's about as good as any of the chalk wide receivers that's Diggs yesterday, who, we would say failed, but like, that's just, you're not happy with those scores, but like that, they weren't death sentences either.
Right.
Mixon wasn't great, but you have Henry as your 5th most exposed guy, 25 fantasy points. Geno Smith, solid enough day at quarterback. Devontae Parker, Mark Andrews, both big stands, 20-something fantasy points. Your highest exposed guys performed much better than the field's highest exposed guys. So I guess the question, the follow-up that I'm trying to get to here, and I don't even know if you and I can get to an answer here, is what failed then?
Not.
Do you know where I'm coming from with that?
What'd you say?
Like, if we're just taking like your top 15 guys, like your performance is so much better than anything of value from the actual owned guys. Where do we think the disconnect is? Where do you think the lineups are falling apart?
So I think the thing was value receivers absolutely smashed yesterday, and that's not how I built my lineups. So like that's one thing that stands out to me, and we kind of touched on it when we were talking about not having David Montgomery and just not really having guys in that price range. I just had a different roster construction in a lot of spots. Like I was over the field on Lamar Jackson, but other than that, I didn't really pay up at. I think I had a decent amount of Kyler too. But I had, a lot of Geno, I had a lot of Mac Jones. So paying down at quarterback, and then I was able to get up to a lot of Cooper Kupp. I was able to pay up for a lot of the running backs. And it was really, you needed Hollins 32 points. You needed the 25 from Gage or the 20 whatever from Romeo Dobbs. Like it just ended up being a slate where a lot of the value guys outscored the pay up options.
Before we touch on some of these value options, let's go ahead and talk about the schedule for the rest of today. We've got the No House Advantage Monday Night Football show coming up at 2 p.m. We've got, I know these are new times now, so I'm going to switch back over because I never updated my sheet. We've got MLB Live Before Lock coming up at 5:30. Adam will be back for that one with Eric. Then we'll have the Showdown Deeper Dive for Monday Night Football coming up at 6:30. Then Showdown Live Before Lock coming up at 7:30. You can see all of this on the screen right now. Plus, if you're interested in free content and you are playing baseball tonight, our MLB player projections are free. All righty. Let's talk about some of these value options yesterday, because we had, and we could use value in a couple different ways. We have guys like Devonte Smith who were 5,200. That's it's not an expensive wide receiver by any means, but smashed. Khalil Herbert, I don't think we could really talk about. He smashed for reasons that we couldn't have seen coming. Ended up being the third highest scorer on the slate, tied for second actually. But Matt Collins, 3,300, 33 fantasy points. Ended up actually being 9% owned in the Millie yesterday, which is pretty annoying.
Yeah, that he individually is a big reason I think why my day didn't go better. Like, he made Devontae Parker irrelevant.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Multiple 4K wide receivers got into the 20s. What are you seeing here from a value perspective that you sort of wish you had? Not necessarily wish you had. Like, obviously, you wish you had all of the guys that played really well, but do you see anything in the value plays that you feel like you missed out on?
Not really. Like, I knew we talked about Matt Collins a lot on the show yesterday morning. I thought he was a good play. I thought he was going to go a little bit over-owned just because of Renfrow being out and people just basically assuming that he was for sure going to get a bunch more work, which the way I put it on the show was like, Renfrow being out certainly doesn't hurt him. There's a chance that he's going to get more work. There's also a chance, you see it all the time, that he doesn't, and he keeps just, running his same routes and, whatever. Like, I thought he would have been a perfectly fine play with Renfrow in. He was still coming off an 8-target week in week 2. But I kind of expected his ownership just to be a little higher than I thought it should be, just because people were going to go after him with Renfrow out. Obviously worked out really well. Devonte Smith, I thought was a really good play. I didn't get there. I didn't get to Jalen Hurts was the thing. I kind of just wasn't. That was another popular game, the Philly-Washington game, that I just wasn't on. So I don't really mind not being on Devonte Smith, given that I knew I just wasn't really on that game. I did think he was a really good play. Obviously, Herbert can't get there. Don't care about defenses. Zay Jones, another very good, cheap wide receiver that just didn't matter because of Matt Collins.
Yeah. Sucks. Like, in terms of value wideouts, the one that I took the biggest stand on, or I guess, that's not the window that I wanted to have open. The one that I took the biggest stand on was Russell Gage, and that worked, which, I was very happy about. Romeo Dobbs also went for north of 20. It was my second biggest value stand. My problem was thinking that Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp would be high scoring wide receivers. And that's just, I went into the slate with just the wrong plan, I guess.
Well, I kind of laugh looking back at it because, I mean, there's so many weeks where like you have these can't miss cheap wide receivers and they miss badly and they're awful. And then like this week, just every one of them just smashed.
Yeah.
Last week, you got the huge game from Dortch as well. So we haven't really had that, we have to play this 4K guy. And then it's like, oh, he's 4K because he just got one target. But they just all went nuts this week. So for me, like that's kind of my biggest takeaway is just I wasn't going to have a good chance to win because of the roster construction here. Like I just was paying up at a position that you didn't need to pay up at.
Yeah. Frustrating slate, honestly. Let's see. Just to look at it quickly. Oh, a decent chunk of 150 maxers made money in the Millie yesterday. Probably like, let's see, I think I could sort or just filter this by profit. Nope, that's not how it works. Only show profit. Yes, show profit. 27 made a profit of the 229 that maxed it. So 10% basically, something in that neighborhood. Go Dolphins finished something high, 6th. That was just one of the highest ranking 150 maxer. ended up finishing. Go Dolphs 10 finished sixth. That was the highest finish for a 150 maxer. The contest was actually shipped by someone with 6 entries. Abe Dollars, now a millionaire. And Single Bullet took second by 1.2 fantasy points.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, and you see it in these lineups too, it just wasn't a slate where you needed a lot of correlation either. I know I'm personally not going to do well on slates like that, but the winning lineup had Jackson to Andrews, no run back. The second place lineup had Jackson to Andrews, no run back.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but typically I'm going to do better on slates where there's more correlation. That was something that I think kind of went wrong, where like I was over the field on Lamar, but then a bunch of my Lamar lineups have like Nelson Aguilar at 6 or 9 or whatever he scored, or Kendrick Bourne. It was just you didn't quite get a full game stack going off. Like, I know if you had the Jags passing game, you looked really good too, but then everybody on the Chargers sucked.
Yeah, that is an interesting way to look at some of these things. Just you started going through it, and we could sort of go through it even more, but just the stack type listed for some of these top lineups: QB tight end, QB tight end, QB tight end with a bring back, QB tight end, QB tight end, QB tight end with a bring back. Very, very minimal aggressive stacking. Takes a while before you get to 2 from the same team and a bring back. That's going to be Jalen Hurts in for that one, but a lot of Lamar at the top. I mean, that's going to happen when Lamar breaks off for 43. Did you have any interest in Lamar? Was he somebody that you were getting to?
Yeah, I had like 5% Lamar at 2% owned.
Okay. Which I guess helped because you did have a pretty good stand on Mark Andrews. So I guess that was...
Yeah, I had a lot of Mark Andrews. And I think Lamar is also another reason why I was as heavy as I was on the Patriots receivers. Like, I know you and I have talked about that on the morning shows before, where everything's just kind of connected. And so I had a good amount of Mac Jones, which explains the Patriots receivers, but then also I'm getting them in my Lamar lineups. So that, kind of, it's just a reminder, like if you're going through the stuff on your own and you're looking at what, you're pulling up exposures for players that you want to see, keep in mind that a lot of the times it's not like, oh, this guy really thought X was a good play. It's like, oh, this guy just fit into the game that this player was stacking a lot.
Anything else we want to touch on just sort of generically about your exposures or your thought process for the slate yesterday?
Not really. I think it's just kind of, again, like it can be difficult to like review stuff and make decisions on like how you played, because I think you just have to, and I know I've mentioned it before, Dink said it a couple of years ago on something I was watching, and it stuck with me. Like, you just have to be aware that there are some slates you're not going to win.
Yep.
Could not have won, basically. And this is one where, just because of the lack of correlation, like, sure, I do make some lineups. Actually, I didn't create in Fantasy Cruncher a single lineup that was quarterback, receiver, no run back. I either did 2 pass catchers and a run back, 2 pass catchers, no run back, or 1 pass catcher, 1 run back. So like, I could not have built what won this slate.
Sure.
And that's just the decision that I think you have to make, as far as, what I don't think you can chase like all these different outcomes. It would be like, it would be like, playing a baseball slate where you're like, oh, well, normally I 5-man stack, but now I'm going to start throwing in some 3-2s and 3-3s just because sometimes they win too. Like, you just have to kind of, I think, come up with a strategy, play to it, and if it wasn't going to win that day, it wasn't going to win that day.
That I don't disagree with at all. There's just going to be days where like you just don't have that kind of combination, and it would have never shown up. No matter how many times you want to go back into like lineup rewind and try to make it's just not going to be that day. And you don't want to chase that kind of.
He said bringbacks is one of the things this season I'm trying not to force. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I do think that they get kind of overstated. But my thing is like, because when you think about correlating, one of the big reasons for it is just, it's so hard to pick the perfect lineup, and you're not even really trying to pick the optimal lineup in NFL because you're just never going to do it. It just gives you less things that you have to be right about, because if your quarterback's game is high scoring, it just becomes more likely that the guy on the other side is doing well too. So it's not a must. And that's, like I said, I do build some lineups that don't have a run back, but I still try. I still, for me, have at least 2 points in my lineup that are correlated. Like in my non-bring back lineups, I have 2 pass catchers, or it's 1-1 or 2-1. So
Sure.
I agree. You don't need the forced bringbacks. For me, I still just want at least that one extra spot of correlation. So that's why I end up with them in a good amount of lineups.
I've been setting it mostly now as a game stack of 2, whether I'm getting one, and it doesn't block me off from having the ability of having more than one pass catcher, but it could come in as, a 2-man stack. It could come in as one with a bring back.
Yeah, that's pretty much
go either
like
direction.
I build the majority of lineups I build in Fantasy Cruncher are 2 pass catchers and a bring back. And then I build a lesser amount of 1-1 and 2-0, and then just rank them against each other.
Well, on Prize Picks, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. They are the sponsor of this show. If you click the link in the description of the video and make a deposit, you can get up to $100 of a deposit match from that deposit. That's a pretty solid deal. You put in 100, they'll give you 100. And you don't have to worry about lineup construction or using an optimizer to try to figure this stuff out. You're picking player props. You're taking over-unders across a multitude of sports. You can do cross-sport parlays as well if you would like. If you put 5 of them together and they all win, you'll net up to 10x your entry fee. I don't think you could ask for much more there. Normally, if this were a baseball show, I'd be hitting Adam up with some pitcher fantasy scores, but this is not that kind of show, so I'm not going to be going to you for 2 individual picks for Prize Picks. All I can say is we have a ton of tools at Stokastic.com that I think will help you out for Prize Picks. We've got video content as well on our YouTube channel that will help you out at Prize Picks. So click the link in the description, go sign up. I think you guys will enjoy it, and hit that like button. 220 people in here, 31 likes, not nearly enough in my opinion. And now I do want to go back to hit George's super chat. Said, just saying thanks for these kind of shows helps me to improve a lot for next week in the NFL. So thanks. Happy to, man. I think Adam and I would probably be on the same page here that so long as we're not aggressively hungover on Monday mornings, like this is a fun show to do.
Yeah. And even today, the coffee's helping.
There you go. The decaf coffee helped me out a lot. Just kidding. All right, let's take a look at the million.
I just made sure to say the word large when I ordered mine today, and it went a lot smoother than yesterday.
That's good, I guess.
Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you were pulling the role models venti large conversation to a degree. Yeah. Large means large.
Okay. It's such a good movie. The unrated edition is on one of the streaming sites now too.
It's fantastic.
I remember I saw it in theaters. I was going to school in South Carolina. Saw it in theaters with my roommate who also lives in my hometown. And we were coming home for some break the next day. And so we saw it at night, and then went back to the dorm, and we're just like, yeah, let's just leave now and go back. I think we quoted that movie for the entire 6-hour drive back. It basically is what kept us awake. Yeah,
it's fantastic. I haven't watched it in a while, but it was good. I remember one of my buddies from home was like, yo, you need to watch this immediately. It's so many lines that are in our vernacular now.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's one of those, if you bring it up, everybody's like, oh yeah, I like that movie, but nobody mentions it as one of the really good late 2000s comedies.
It's so good. All right, Abe Dollars, here's your moment to shine. We're going to take a look at your Millie winning lineup. We'll kick it off. Lamar Jackson, obviously in the quarterback spot, very low owned and smashed 43 fantasy points. Is he Aaron Judge?
Lamar?
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Is he just going to play out the string and then just sign a truly bonkers contract?
Yes.
Seems like it, right?
Probably. I mean, maybe
back-to-back 100-yard rushing days, 7 passing touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. It's nuts.
I'm just interested to see where he ends up. Baltimore can't actually let him walk.
You would think. Dameon Pierce then in at one of the running back spots, just 18 fantasy points. Fournette in at one of the running back spots, just 12 fantasy points. Alan Lazard, 14. Crazy lineup that ended up winning $1 million here. Devonte Smith, though, you needed at 34 fantasy points. Jalen Waddle at 18, salvaged after a pretty slow start. Then you needed Mark Andrews and Mac Hollins, 29 and 33 respectively. And then Jags D with 9. This is not a lineup that I think I would ever play, but at the same time, Is that better for a Millie?
It's like, I think it's a fine lineup. All of the plays in it were good, made sense. Like, no issues. Lamar obviously is great. You have him paired with Andrews. Jags D was whatever. Matt Collins was, one of the better projected value guys. Jalen Waddle was in, what was expected to be a high scoring game. Devonte Smith was a really good option. Lazard is fine. You had no Watson, so it did kind of narrow down the Green Bay receiving core a bit. Fournette and Pierce were both popular. Like, all the plays were good plays. They made sense. I kind of mentioned it. Like, it's not a lineup I would have played just because I personally would have wanted another piece of correlation somewhere, whether that is, Bateman instead of Smith, or whether it's, one of the Patriots receivers instead of Hollins. Like, I think over a really large sample, you're probably better off just going that route. You're like if you ask me in this particular lineup, would I rather have Hollins or Kendrick Bourne? I'm going to say Kendrick Bourne, just because if the Lamar Andrews piece goes off, there should be a lot of passing coming back the other way. If you ask me if I'd rather have, Devonte Smith or Bateman, I'm going to go Bateman just because he correlates with Lamar. And then the flip side of that too is, if you get that massive game from Devonte Smith, that means Jalen Hurts is having a big game, and now you have Jalen Hurts lineups to contend with. That's kind of like the inverse too. It's another reason why I like correlation in lineups. Kind of the inverse, where you're just walking like a little bit less narrow path, instead of saying like, oh, well, I need this receiver to go off, but then I need to beat all of the lineups that have him paired with his quarterback. I think all of the plays individually were good. I personally wouldn't have played them together in this way, but I think it's a solid enough lineup. It's not one of, there's plenty of Millionaire Maker lineups where you look and you just go, what the hell is this? This isn't one of those.
No. I don't think it would have been likely for me to get this lineup, but I don't think that there's anything on the surface that's an actual problem. And we've certainly seen somewhere we're like, we don't know how this happened. So second place was 1.2 points behind. Very different lineup too.
Defensive 1.2 points.
So you get Lamar and you get Mark Andrews. You don't get a New England piece. You get a double Raider stack of Josh Jacobs and Matt Collins. Is it Chris Olave?
I think, but I'm not sure. Even when I drafted him in best ball, and I would say his name to myself, I never knew how to say it.
That's the way that I'm going here. So in for 27, Cordarrelle Patterson in for 25, T. Higgins for 14, Diggs for 14.4, and then Jags D. I guess, I feel like when I look at this lineup, it has more points than the first one did, which is kind of ridiculous. It just feels like some of these numbers are bigger, but it's obviously not the case. Kind of the same sort of structure there. You get the double stack of the Raiders.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is weird, actually. It's like they want it it's the Diggs piece is what throws it off.
I guess, yeah. It's just weird. I don't have anything to say, really. I mean, this is basically the same structured lineup. Nothing. Do you have any issue with the Jacobs Hollins piece? Because I don't.
No, that's actually one of the things that you and I think both kind of learned from doing these shows a couple of years ago was I used to not let that happen. And then I just realized that I needed to stop doing that because it was very, very frequently in winning lineups. I still limit, and I don't know if you do, I still limit, I won't play two receivers without their quarterback or the opposing quarterback.
Okay.
Two pass catchers, I should say. But running back, wide receiver, I'm fine with because they can both get there without pulling a quarterback along with them.
I don't mind having the two just because I know that I'm going to also have that the same situation elsewhere with the quarterback. So it's just, I don't want to block myself out just because I can't play two quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's just for me, if I play, let's say I play, I don't know, a New England stack with A.J. Brown and Devonte Smith, if those two in the same game do what I want them to do, Jalen Hurts scored 30-something points.
Sure. But I
guess the flip side to that is I have a different roster construction because Mac Jones is so much cheaper than Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, not something that I would block off at all there. Now, salary changes it up a little bit. There's going to be times where I might not want, and it's just going to be harder to get to two very, a highly priced running back and a highly priced wide receiver, independent of those two things. But that's usually just a salary constriction that won't bother me as much. I want to get to a different sort of lineup construction. All right. So the first one that had any actual stacking was lineup number 8, Holly Rock 7, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonte Smith, had Curtis Samuel as the bring back, got Patterson and Pierce in at the 2 running back spots, got the Mark Andrews piece correct, got the Chris Olave piece correct, got the Jags defense in here as well. It's another lineup that looks really good. This is one where this looks like something that I would be playing.
Yeah, I absolutely would play that lineup. That looks like a really good lineup.
Yeah. So I don't really have too much crazy here. Like it just looks good. How much was Lamar? 8K? Okay, so couldn't have got to Lamar from Hurts here. It would have been $400 more, but it also would have been enough. It would have won it, which you can't really make that change, but that's brutal.
Yeah, but that's an example. You got, well, I guess you could, like AJ Brown and Devonte Smith did well, but you still would have been better off playing Lamar. But also, like, if you tell me AJ Brown scoring 19.5 points, I'm just going to play a different receiver.
Yep. The other lineup that had a 4-person stack that got to 9th, this one didn't have Hurts. It ended up having Lamar Jackson, and it is basically unowned. Total ownership, 38.6%. It's just all single-digit ownership guys. Lamar with Andrews and Duvernay, which ended up not being the one that we was looking for. Antonio Gibson wasn't all that great, but had Derrick Henry, had Devonte Smith, had Matt Collins, had Damian Harris, and then Jets D. This lineup had some potential. And the sneaky thing is here, like, even if you wanted to try to make it a little bit less contrarian, since everybody's just single digits, it's not like swapping anybody out to try to pick up chalk was like the correct play here.
Yeah, really heavily correlated lineup too. You have the Ravens double stack with Damian Harris, but then you also have the Antonio Gibson, Devonte Smith pairing.
Do you add any double stacks?
Derrick Henry, Matt Collins pairing.
Yeah. Do you try to add like secondary stacks?
No, I like the idea of it, but I don't personally do it.
I have,
because it slows fantasy culture down so much.
Yeah, so I have been doing it, just adding an extra game stack into FC and just allowing that, just having some other sort of 2-person, 3-person group from another game.
Yeah. The way that like I prefer to do it is to just set it so, like, if I have a wide receiver projected for at least 12 points, it bumps the other good players on the other team, by 10, 15% or whatever. But it also just runs insanely slow if you do that. Yeah,
it does grind to a halt at that point in time.
So what do you just do it in the games?
So what I've been doing is setting 2 separate game stacks. 1 for 3 to include the quarterback, 1 for 2, and then it just will spit out either like a quarterback with a 2-man stack and then another 2-man game stack, or it'll be 1 and 1 on opposite sides. But and it ran pretty quick, actually. Like, I was able to rip off 2,000 pretty quickly yesterday, relatively speaking. I've noticed that when I generally set like my big groups, that's when it starts to chug, which makes sense. The more you throw at it to make it more complex, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I mean, I had so much digs yesterday that it's going to cloud anything that we would look at for anything that I did anyway. Just when he's in 65% of it, it's going to change every number. We haven't done this yet. I want to run all the way to the bottom before we go take a look at the flea flicker. Who had
I meant to message you guys. We can look at the slant instead of the flea flicker. I had said before the show I wanted the flea. I didn't know we were looking at the Millie because it hadn't worked in the first 2 weeks.
Okay. That's fine. We'll take a peek at it then. I want to look quickly at what was the worst lineup in the Millie yesterday that was actually a lineup. This one has Tua at quarterback, but looks like it's got some other garbage. Stafford. It's so hard to find because, like, it's so very clear that, like, some of these lineups aren't real. This one's probably pretty real. Yeah, okay, so this one just sucked. 39.96. This is domination. He finished 236,000. Stafford, Montgomery, Sanders, Cooks, Aguilar, Allen Robinson, Darren Waller, Mike Williams, Chargers D. I mean, do I want more than like just Stafford and Allen Robinson? Sure. Like, is it highly uncorrelated? Like, you get a Montgomery Cooks correlation, and that's fine. That's just a tough beat. Like Matt Stafford got to 10.16 fantasy points. It's the only guy in this entire lineup that got double digits. The Chargers D had negative. Just that's a tough beat to put together a lineup with real plays, with chalk like Montgomery, chalk like Sanders, Aguilar, very reasonable play. No one's ever freaking out because you get to Mike Williams or Darren Waller. Like that's just you put it in there with like a really solidly put together lineup that projected well, that had good ownership, and it just shit the bed from top to bottom, clear across the board.
That's a rough one.
Normally you look at this and it's just like, I don't really like this construction. Like for that flyer.
I don't like the construction, but it's certainly defensible.
Right. Like in the Millie, you're probably better off to have a little bit less correlation, or at least not necessarily forcing the correlation just because you got to beat so many different entries. But that one didn't beat anything.
What place did you say that one was in?
236,483.
Oh, okay. My worst is 236,005.
All right, I'm going to scroll up and get to it quickly.
57.7 points.
236,055?
005.
Oh, 005. I was like, that's not where that is, man. You're looking at the wrong stuff. All right, so we get Baker and DJ Moore. Kamara on the bring back. None of that went well. Mostert, tough one. Justin Jefferson, tough one. Kendrick Bourne, good enough, I guess, for 3,600 in comparison to everything.
Close to good enough on this slate.
No. Higbee, 10. That's like acceptable tight end, but not what you're looking for. Joe Mixon, just clean bust. And then Falcons D, also bust. Pretty bad, man. Pretty bad. You can't, it's a bottom 1% lineup. How many of those did you put together?
Quite a few.
All right, let's hop over to the slant then. So you ran different lineups in the slant?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Like same set of lineups, just played some different ones. I ranked the metrics I used to rank my lineups in the slant were different than the ones I used in the Millie.
Okay,
but
good.
It was like from the same group of lineups.
That was going to be my follow-up, because I was going to say, well, like, I think you and I should have a conversation about how you probably shouldn't play those contests the same aggression, but
yeah,
you got to where I thought you were going. So, okay, so this is a spot where you actually did get to a little bit more David Montgomery. You did get to Diggs. You did get to some Fournette. I don't want to put the words into your mouth, but I think there's a pretty obvious reason why you're getting to those guys a little bit more than you did in the Millie. Do you care to let everybody know?
I like the actual reason, or why in theory?
Both, I guess.
I mean, I just wasn't using raw ownership to choose these lineups.
Yeah. If you're in a contest with 26,000 total entries, like we see here in the slant, in comparison to a contest with 200-something thousand entries, you have the ability to play significantly chalkier lineups in a 26,000 person contest than you do in the 200,000. That's why it's a lot easier to work in some we saw Adams' exposures. It was very light on Montgomery, on Diggs, on Fournette. It's very different in this case with a smaller field. You can work those guys in. You don't see that same like aggressive red. You do have some red for the chalkier guys here, but it's not the same way that it looked like in the Millie. And that's a conscious decision. You understand that the contest that you're entering needs to be played differently. You can't just blindly, you don't want to just blindly enter the same 150 unless those contests are set up similarly.
Yeah. And yeah, so this is actually, and to me, I don't care. I don't know if anybody else gives a shit, but like to me, this is interesting just because, like I said, I kind of been playing around with just kind of tweaking my process and playing a little bit more contrarian. This set of lineups is what I would have played in the Millie last week.
Okay.
But then I've started mixing in raw ownership just to, in addition to, leverage and all of that. So, yeah, to me, it's just kind of interesting too, like the difference in exposures. Here, you're getting a lot more of, I'm kind of in line with the field on a lot of stuff, which I think has its pros and cons, but also to me, like you were saying, makes a lot more sense in a 26,000 person tournament than a 200 and whatever thousand.
Yeah, like in a smaller contest, you should not be getting away from the chalk that aggressively. In a 200,000 person contest, you can, but like there comes a point where you're giving up too much of the best fantasy point per dollar plays to get away from it. And in the slant, you didn't. And the places that you did get away from it, the Irv Smiths of the world are on paper the easiest kind of chalk plays to get away from. You don't like to get away from Montgomery in a smaller contest just seems insane. To get away from Diggs in a smaller contest seems insane. Irv Smith, the value tight end for the day, you can always find different versions of Irv Smith. But like you were still able to get to a heavy amount of Cooper Kupp while also still having Diggs. Like on the surface, I like the look of your slant exposures more, but it's hard to like the look of your exposures in the millie if you're playing it to try to adjust for the fact that you need to hit like a lottery ticket.
Right. Yeah, like I like the way my slant exposures look also, but I also realize a big reason I like it is because it's less scary to look at. Like I'm not looking at like 10 different players going like, oh man, if these guys are popular, or if these guys do well, I'm really in trouble. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of torn on which I prefer.
I'm going to take a look quickly now at average ownership for the slant and see where you're at. So you are, oh God, I'm bad at math, which is not something that I should say out loud. 80 people maxed the slant. You are 74th in average ownership. So a little bit higher.
So I'm still low. I'm still towards the bottom though.
Yes. Yeah. Huh. And like the high man is Red Brick at an average of 153. Oxen Duck had 139. Yours was 78.5. But 78.5 in the slant. I don't remember what it was in the. Do you remember what it was in the millie? It's in the 50s, I believe.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I'm going to have it here in a second, but 78.5% in the slant, 51% in the millie. So I do think that those numbers are like going in the correct direction.
Yeah, it's just, do I actually need to do that in the millie? Like in the slant, I'm still on a lot of the same games. Like I got to more of the Bills, obviously, but like I was still heavily overweight on Mac Jones. I was still heavily overweight on Geno. So like that didn't change. I had a lot of Matthew Stafford more than I did in the millie. I had less. So like I had less Kyler Murray. I had less Lamar. Those are guys that I think those are the type of plays that I like that I got to at low ownership. Obviously Kyler sucked, but just in theory, I like getting up to those guys.
I'm sure you don't mind any time that Cooper Kupp and Stephon Diggs are your two most exposed players either.
No. Yeah, certainly not at all. What did I do? How much Derrick Henry did I have?
In the slant?
In the slant.
11.
Yeah, so I mean I had 18 in the millie. Like that's another one. Like that's the type of play that I really liked getting to at low ownership, but also getting 11% instead of 18%. Like at 4% owned, that's still fine.
Yeah, you're still getting to him. It's not as extreme. It probably shouldn't be as extreme. He didn't look like as good of a play on paper. We got another stinker out of Jonathan Taylor. Anxious to see what his price ends up being moving forward.
Yeah, I think overall I prefer my exposures in the slant.
I would agree. I prefer your exposures in the slant as well.
Yeah, especially if my lineups are balanced. And you said they were, like that the average ownership of my lineups was still pretty low.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it looks good. Let me look at your average score. So this is going to be based on FC projection, but we're comparing apples to apples here. Your average projected lineup via FC's projections was 132.5 at that 78% mark. If we look at it in the millie, that average projected score 128.8. So you were also giving up like you were giving up like 4 fantasy points to get even more contrarian there. So that is good to see that you also brought those fantasy points back as well. And that's going to happen when the more you're playing the chalk, the higher those projected ownerships are going to be, the higher your projected lineup score is going to be, because the reason guys are chalk is because they're the best fantasy per point per dollar plays on the slate, generally speaking.
Yeah, and just like kind of looking through my slant lineups, because again, this goes back to what we talk about a lot. It's not player exposures, it's your lineup as a whole. It's one thing to tell me I'm playing a lot of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. That can mean that I'm playing really chalky lineups, or it can mean that I'm just playing them in low owned lineups. So like just looking at the Josh Allen lineups that are towards the top for me, like I'm perfectly fine with them. You know, you have a popular Allen, you have a popular Diggs, but paired him with Chase Edmonds, so like that automatically makes that game stack contrarian. 2% owned Alvin Kamara, 4% owned Valdez Scantling, low owned Romeo Dobbs, low owned Eagles defense. So like it's not like I'm just playing massive chalk teams still.
I'm looking at that same lineup right now. Like it looks good. I don't see anything that I would naturally just want to change right out of the gate. I like every piece of it. Romeo Dobbs was good. Eagles D was good. Like this one just.
I forgot that Hines and Bourne were in my best lineup. That's really annoying.
Let me take a look at that. So that's Lamar, Josh Jacobs, Naheem Hines, Bourne, Dobbs, Gage, Andrews, Cup, and Seahawks D. Yuck. For you, yuck, at least.
It's just, so for one, Jacobs got tackled at the 1 yard line. I saw that. That wasn't fun. Bourne, obviously could have been Devontae Parker for 400 more. Hines could have been Pierce. Like I didn't have the salary to just, make those two, but like, same price range kind of thing. Like could have been a lot better. Also could have gotten overtime from Gage and Dobbs, but Tom Brady sucks.
Is there anything else we should touch on for this slate? Anything that we didn't really dig into? Any like overarching thoughts?
No, I appreciate everybody watching my personal review show.
I don't think we need to look at the 20 lineups that I played in whatever the hell the bigger 20 max was. On the other multiple 20 max and single entry contests that I got in and got my ass kicked in.
So where to go? Stephen Leibowitz said, so if you're playing some more chalk in the 26K entries, it sounds like you need to thread the needle more on the rest of your lineups. So the way I kind of think of it, and I was messaging Josh about this yesterday when I was looking at a lot of my Millie lineups. It's more so like if you look at the lineups I played in the slant, it's still a lot of contrarian lineups where, like I had Lamar. I didn't have much Lamar in the slant. But where I had like Mac Jones or I had Geno. The biggest difference I think is that it's just mixing in the guys like Stephon Diggs or, whoever projected the best. Whereas my Millie lineups, it was kind of just saying like, all right, well, you have this 1% stack, and then you're also going to play some 2% owned running backs and wide receivers with it. Which, in the Millie, I think is still fine. But ideally, from a roster construction standpoint, I prefer the one where it's like, all right, you're different here. Now play the best plays.
Yeah. The sort of just get different and then jam in the best plays scenario is usually where I'm going to be landing the most. The Millie is just such a completely different force of nature for how big the actual contest is.
Yeah, but and at the same time, though, I don't even think somebody said any immediate adjustments stick out from this review. For me, it's probably that I'm just going to go back to playing the Millie the way I played the slant also, and the way that I have been playing it in the past. Just because one thing that I've sort of just always noticed from doing these review shows is obviously the Millie is insanely difficult to win, but it's not like that difficult to win in terms of like, you don't need just like 1% owned random guys, one on top of the other. Like last year, if I played it, I had a Millie winning lineup last year, and it was just like a normal lineup. I didn't win the Millie, I didn't play it, but like I had a slant lineup that would have won the Millie, and it was just like a normal lineup that I played in the slant. And you see that a lot. Even this week, like chalk busted heavily, and you still had the winning lineup with a bunch of 10, 12% owned guys.
My average overall exposure was like right around 100%. So I was much, much jockier, but in way smaller contests, like the front four that I'm looking at right now, 14,000 entries. So I got nothing else here. This is fun to look through everything, man. Weird slate yesterday. Just another day, just like clean bust. Like, who was the best chalky play yesterday?
Mac Hollins.
Josh Allen?
Mac Hollins.
Yeah, Mac Hollins. Yeah. And that's Mac Hollins was 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 4, like 16th in ownership or something like that. So
was he higher or lower owned in the slant?
That's something we didn't actually look at. The sort of like who were the best plays, who were not the best plays. But we'll save that for a different week because we're going to pack it in here. That'll do it, folks. NFL Strategy Show lineup review in the books. Thank you for joining us. It was fun to break all this stuff down. Adam will be back a little bit later for the MLB Live Before Lock show, so make sure you're tuning into that one. Check out the rest of our great content for today, including our Showdown, Deeper Dive, and Live Before Lock for Monday Night Football, Cowboys, and Giants. Good luck to everybody. It was fun talking to you guys. We'll talk to you later. Peace.